Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, or for wherever you're joining us. My name is Andy Blanchard, and I lead our emerging issues team here at ISO. But enough about me. I wanted to be able to jump right into a webinar. We are really excited to have everyone here. First, though, I will start with our antitrust statement, as we always do. The policy of Verisk Analytics and subsidiary companies is to comply in all respects with federal and state antitrust laws. With this in mind, we want to mention that during all seminars held in our auspices, this policy prohibits discussion of certain topics. Because we want to avoid even the appearance of an antitrust violation, we go beyond the letter of the law, and we will not discuss any matter that violates the spirit of the antitrust laws or could be perceived as doing so. A copy of our policy statement on discussions at meetings can be found at verisk.com/statement. Our topic today, modern cannabis 2021 and beyond. And I have to tell you, even though our ISO emerging issues team tracks over 40 topics, it's really a challenge to stay atop cannabis. It seems like every day there's a new state legalizing cannabis, there's a new cannabinoid being discovered or synthesized, a new celebrity starting a cannabis company. And sometimes I wish we almost could devote a full-time person on studying this fascinating topic. But fortunately, we do have our guest today, and he does just that. So we're really excited to have Sean Arnold with us. He is founder of a cannabis consulting firm, Terradigm Consulting, and he's going to share his unique insights and some of the latest developments in the cannabis industry. And he's going to get into both potential risk exposures and also new opportunities, because I think a lot of times when we think about cannabis, we kind of immediately think about all the risks, and certainly they are prevalent, but clearly there's opportunities as well. So without further ado, I'm going to pass the mic to Sean. Sean, it's all yours.
All right, thank you very much, Andy. It's a pleasure to be here today, and thank you all who are listening. I'm excited to share my insights on the industry with you. A little background on myself. As Andy had mentioned, I'm co-founder of Terradigm Consulting. I personally got started in the cannabis industry in 2014. I had what I consider to be one of the most incredible job opportunities, being handed the keys to an empty 10,000 square foot warehouse with 4 licenses, 2 medical and 2 recreational, to bring forth a vision for an edibles company in the Colorado market. And with a lot of determination and a solid team surrounding me, we did exactly that. Over time, we built that into a multi-state operation, had operations in Nevada, Pennsylvania. We won licenses in Ohio and Missouri. And in time, the ownership team came together and decided to sell. And we found a larger MSO to sell most of our assets to. And at that time, a couple of my colleagues and I got together and thought we have a lot of experience and knowledge. So why don't we form a consulting team and bring that experience to the table and help others find their own success, which is where we founded Terradigm Consulting. And as Andy had mentioned, we're a comprehensive cannabis consulting team, and we focus primarily on quality management principles and continual improvement within the industry. So once again, just happy to be here and happy to share some insights. So with that, we'll jump into and talk about where the cannabis industry is today and the opportunities at hand. So we have to tip our hat to California for kicking us off back in the mid-90s and legalizing medical cannabis. Over the next 2.5 decades, we've seen 70% of the U.S. follow suit. We currently have 36 states with medical cannabis programs, and that's serving just under 4 million registered patients. Last year, the medical side of the industry saw around $9 billion in sales, and that comprised about 45% of the total market share. That's expected to grow over the next 5 years to exceed 15 billion, and market share will actually drop down to 35% from 45%. And that's because obviously the growth on the recreational side is going to outpace the medical growth. In 2012, we have Colorado and Washington to thank for legalizing recreational cannabis. And as many of you know, over the last 9 years, we've seen 16 other states doing the same. So we now have approximately 43% of the adult population, 108 million citizens with access to legal cannabis, and that's pretty impressive. There's about 41 million actual cannabis consumers within that population. Last year, recreational sales around $11.2 billion in sales. That was 55% of the market share, and that's expected to grow north of 27 billion by 2025, and it'll encompass about 65% of the market share. Now, we all experienced a turbulent year last year with the pandemic, but it was pretty impressive to see how the cannabis industry responded. 70% increase in sales in 2020 alone. So really kind of eye-catching numbers there. We're seeing this spread out amongst various business models. There's about 7,500 dispensaries across the states. We see approximately 12,000 growers, 4,000 processors, manufacturers, and 300 testing labs serving the industry. All in all, it's about 320,000 full-time jobs currently. We expect to see that number rise, obviously, as more states come online and more businesses are awarded licenses. We're also seeing public approval at an all-time high. Recent Gallup polls show that that's hovering around 68%, up from low 60s over the last decade. So we're seeing a wider acceptance among the general population. We're also seeing a shift in the dynamics of the consumer base. And so over the past 3 years, we've seen about a 10% increase in the female consumer base, and it's now about a 50-50 split between female and male consumers. Generationally, millennials are leading the charge. 26% of the market are millennials, followed by Generation X, and then baby boomers following suit. In terms of products that we're seeing in popularity, flower is king of the hill, has been king of the hill, and will probably be king of the hill for the foreseeable future. Following closely behind are vapes, and then edibles are gaining some traction. We're seeing a new category within edibles being beverages. Beverages saw the largest increase over the last year with a 70% increase. Still a fairly small market share, but anticipate that really growing in time. So behind the edibles, we're seeing extracts and concentrates, and then tinctures and topicals round out that list. Tinctures and topicals combined for about 4% of total market share. So smaller, but still a player in the game. So total market share, including the illicit market, last year was 88.5 billion. So I'd be remiss if I didn't touch on the fact that there is an illicit market, and it's a rather healthy market. So 66 billion on the illicit side. A lot of that can be attributed just from the dynamics of this country and the federal legalization or lack thereof, and where consumers for the longest time have had to access the product until we've seen that shift that we just discussed. Now, for comparison purposes, to look at other consumer spending, soft drinks on an annual basis, 146 billion. Beer, and that's not including craft beer, is 119 billion. Tobacco is 99 billion, and coffee is 82 billion. So when you look at the total market share, including illicit sales, cannabis is a pretty healthy market, and I think it's going to give at least beer a run for its money in that respect. What's interesting to note as well on market growth is a study that came out evaluating the prices, and the fluctuation have shown that in Colorado, Washington, California, and Nevada, all 4 of those states have seen a price per milligram drop on consumables. So that would be edibles, tinctures, and topicals. And so while we're seeing sales increase, we are seeing more competition in the market, which is driving prices down. Now, with this growth, we're going to see millions of new consumers come to the market, thousands of new jobs created, lots of new products and concepts being explored, researched, and developed. And that's going to usher the next generation of cannabis into the marketplace. So now that you've got a pretty good overview of where the market's at and the trajectory of growth, I want to now start to discuss the opportunities and exposures that the industry has. And so I like to preface this with the industry has a lot of talented professionals coming forth, a lot of great businesses and great concepts being developed, but there's obviously a lot of opportunity for improvement. And so this is by no means a slight on the industry. It's just recognizing the opportunity for improvement, and this is across the board. So this is an area that we like to look at and say, how can we make this better for both the industry as well as consumers? And so we'll start that off by talking about regulatory environment. And I'd be remiss if I didn't start that conversation off by touching on banking. Now, banking is obviously one of the biggest opportunities to reduce unnecessary safety risk in terms of the amount of cash management that we see with the lack of traditional banking channels to the industry. We anticipate that's going to change, but it is definitely a big point of discussion. And I think with banking reform, you'll also see greater equitable access to opportunities with the industry. It's right now, it's difficult. You have to find private financing. Terms are not always, the best. And so those changes, I think, will be a really positive change for the industry. Compliance is, I think, one of the biggest opportunities here in terms of addressing some of the shortcomings from a regulatory standpoint, and it is a challenge. So when it comes to compliance, each state has its own laws, and those can change even within the municipalities within a given state. And we are talking, sometimes it's the list of qualifying conditions, maybe it's the allowed products that you have, sampling and testing requirements, types of extraction methods you're allowed to use, cannabinoid content limitations, and then investment limitations. Some states don't allow for out-of-state investments. And so that makes it challenging for operators within that space to stay competitive with other markets in terms of growth and being able to advance their internal processes and product development. Within states, we're also seeing laws are changing. Now, I'm going to touch on this a little bit later when we talk about the trends and things that are working towards addressing these concerns, but it's a slippery slope staying compliant in the industry because laws are constantly evolving and changing. Sometimes these are small changes, sometimes they're much bigger, and it takes a compliance team to stay on top of those. And if you're a multi-state operator, you've got to balance both the changes of state regulations within each market, as well as how that's going to impact your processes and your standard operating procedures from one market to another. So there are, some definite challenges in that regard. In addition, not all regulations are found in the state cannabis regs. And what I mean by that is there are other agencies with oversight. So if an operator comes in and is looking purely at the list of state regulations, it makes it extremely you're vulnerable to perhaps missing a zoning requirement or a fire and safety requirement that's specific to a municipality that is not listed in the state regs. And then you also have some federal oversight from OSHA or EPA in some of the requirements in that regard. On top of that, there's a variability in the enforcement. So more licenses a state issues, the more resources they need at hand to enforce those. And as we've seen, not all states take the same approach to licensing and enforcement. Most, if not all states, have state tracking systems to track the plants from seed to sale. And so using RFID identification tags, there is a management of tracking from start to finish all the way to the consumer. That's a good system for making sure that everything is accounted for within the operation. However, these state tracking systems aren't always equipped to handle compliance matters, and so they will allow operators to fall out of compliance, and that's an opportunity there to address those shortcomings within those systems. In addition to regulations, there's a lot of variability in the industry. There's variability in the agricultural products that are produced. These are sensitive plants to a certain regard, and so any fluctuations in environmental conditions can impact the quality of product and the salability of the products. You're going to see as well variability in the raw materials, and this is one area that I like to identify and share with those that are not familiar with the industry. In traditional manufacturing, you have typically a set standard and consistency with products that are or raw materials that are being used to make a finished product. In cannabis, there is a variability in the raw materials you're using, and that's in the form of the concentrate. And so there's some inconsistencies from one batch to another. Sometimes they're minor, sometimes they are greater in scope. That could be cannabinoid content, it could be terpene profile, or other phytochemical constituents of that concentrate. That can impact flavor, it can impact consistency of the product. And so in traditional manufacturing, you're going to have master batch records, and that's your beacon for creating a product. In cannabis, in some products, you're going to need more than one master batch record that's going to give you a range of recipe formulations to meet the fluctuation in that raw material. And so there's variability there, and understanding how to manage that variability in your manufacturing process is extremely important for providing consistent quality products to the consumers. You're also going to have variability in processes and equipment, and it's very important that operators understand that just because a manufacturer touts their equipment to perform at a certain spec, it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to meet that spec time and time again. So maintenance and operational qualifications and validation play into the variability that we see from equipment performance. And that kind of ties into quality assurance and quality management. GMPs, SOPs, and quality are common buzzwords in the industry, and it's great to hear people talking about them. If you Google any cannabis company, there's a pretty good chance you'll see quality mentioned somewhere on their website, and that's great. But when you start to dive into it a little bit deeper, you see there's quality is broadly referenced, but the quality management principles are a little bit more narrowly applied. So there's a lot of opportunity for improvement here. With GMP and SOPs that support GMP, GMP is really built on a quality management framework. And so when I talk to clients and we're talking about quality management, I often get the response, well, we have SOPs, and that's great, and that's important to have. But how are you managing those SOPs? Are they performing and delivering on the intended purpose and function that you have designed them for? And what else are you doing to track and understand that? So quality assurance, quality management goes beyond state mandated testing, and that's another response we will get oftentimes as well. We do the state mandated testing, and that's obviously a very important aspect of quality and safety in terms of product and consistency for the end consumer. But there's more that goes into quality management on the front end that can safeguard both the company and the public health and safety. And kind of rounding out the list of exposures in the industry, high turnover is a big one. And so if you're not too familiar with the industry, high turnover is something that the industry is notorious for, in some cases as high as 40–45%. And so I think this is a shared responsibility between employees and employers, and they both contribute to this this issue. I think from an employee's perspective, there may be some disconnect between perception and reality of what it is to work in the industry. Maybe there's this glamorous perception that it's going to be a really easy job. You're gonna smoke weed and just sell, you know, to consumers. But it's really far from the truth. It's a very professional industry, and people are taking this very serious. They understand that this is an opportunity of a lifetime, and we want to take that responsibility very seriously. And so when you get into it, you realize it's challenging work. Sometimes the processes are monotonous, repetitive processes that aren't that exciting. And the money, while everybody talks about how much money it's generating, there's a lot that goes into these businesses, a lot of taxes, a lot of expenses in supporting the testing, the compliance teams. And so you're not just going to walk in and become a millionaire overnight. And so I think there's some perception and reality that disconnect that exists there. From an employer's perspective, we've seen a lack of talent development in some cases. And we also have seen time and time again where talented professionals are brought in to join a team, but really the intent was just to have them there in a short term. And so they fulfill their obligations and they're let go, and that's also contributing to the problem. Either way, this has a direct impact on the quality and compliance, and what we see is a knowledge transfer gap. When employees leave, information is not passed along, it's not documented, and so you see these problems contributing to a company's risk profile. And so that's a general overview of some of the major exposures that I see in the industry. By no means is this an exhaustive list. There are definitely other exposures, but in the general context and I think perspective of the audience today, these are some of the bigger issues that I see. And so going to look at the trends in the industry that are helping address those concerns, those exposures. And so you know, one of the top things that I'm looking at that I'm excited about is the talent development and education programs that we're seeing come about. And knowledge is key to the growth and maturity of the industry, and we're seeing this in a couple facets. We you know, over the past couple of years, starting to see some bigger name universities, colleges recognize the need and the value for this type of curriculum. And obviously with the economic value and size of the industry, these programs are being brought. And so you have industry professionals collaborating with these universities and colleges to develop the programs. And then you're also seeing platforms for professional development. So giving people in the industry an opportunity to expand their body of knowledge and their experience, cross-departmental training, which is great. And so it promotes creativity and progression within the industry and also professional growth. And so that's one that I personally am excited about in engaging in to grow and mature the industry from that perspective. We're seeing an advancement in technologies, and this is across the board. So you have software advancements, and those are applicable to both regulatory, you know, in tracking and enforcement. You're seeing that software being applied to enterprise planning and management, customer retention management, and equipment. And software is tied. Pretty much most equipment that you're seeing in the space today has some sort of computer interface, and what that is affording is greater insight and transparency into the performance of the equipment and the processes, and allowing operators to identify potential deviations within the process that can be addressed before they become larger problems. And so controls with tied into equipment, whether it's lighting and environmental controls or your manufacturing and processing controls. It's great to have that real-time adjustment and flexibility in managing those environments and processes. And it's important, as I touched on earlier, with small fluctuations in your cultivation environments, you can experience some major problems. So having real-time insight and making those adjustments can go a long way to ensuring product quality and consistency. We're also seeing the equipment evolve. When I got involved in the industry, there were very few equipment manufacturers servicing the industry specifically. So you would have to go out and find manufacturing equipment that was used in parallel industries to serve your needs. And oftentimes that equipment was oversized and really not effective at handling the product that we were working with. And so the equipment would either malfunction or it would sit idle a lot of the time. And so you've had over the last several years, more and more equipment manufacturers recognize that operations within cannabis are really servicing a smaller population. And so the equipment should be redesigned and retooled to fit that smaller footprint. And so we're seeing that response. On the cultivation side, a lot of advancements in lights and vertical grow infrastructure has come a long way. I know when I got started, it was pretty much high intensity discharge or high pressure sodium lighting were the go-to lights. They're still being employed in the industry. However, they are extremely energy intensive. And there is some upkeep on those. So we are seeing a shift towards LEDs and a wide acceptance of LED lights. Both energy consumption is much lower. The cost to run those over time is lower. But there are also a lot of research going into the benefits of the various light spectrums that are afforded from LED lighting. So that's really exciting to see. Extraction and processing equipment has also been revamped quite a bit over the last few years. A lot of processes that were independent have now been streamlined and combined within single extraction processing equipment. So what might have taken several days to run a product from start to finish is now done in a single day with one piece of equipment. So that's pretty exciting to see that evolution of equipment and technology being applied in this space. Research and development is another area that has got a lot of attention. In recent weeks, we've seen the DEA begin issuing research licenses after years of no activity, so that's promising. And there's several channels that are taking up, the research space. So you have clinical, which is really pharmacological in nature, looking at bioavailability, delivery systems, and the interaction of these products with the endocannabinoid system, which is within everybody's body. You also have research from academia, and that's a little bit more focused towards industry and the sociology and sociological impact and acceptance across the board there. So some interesting research happening there, and that's also, I think, going to play into benchmarking and best practices as the industry matures. More information is coming to light, and so improving the efficiency and performance of manufacturing and cultivation. And then on the business side, you have operators looking to refine processes, improve upon grow methodologies, and last but definitely not least, product development. And as I touched on with the recent surgence in beverage manufacturing, I think we're going to continue to see more and more creative concepts come to market, unique delivery systems, flavor combinations. I think we're going to see a shift also to highlight the importance of terpenes, which are one of the constituents, phytochemicals within the plant that impact flavor, but there's also a tremendous amount of therapeutic benefit coming from those compounds. So that's on the research front. And then we are going to see a revision and an update in regulations, seeing that in some states where they recognize there are some deficiencies in terms of the quality management elements within the manufacturing framework, complaint handling, CAPA and recall plans. So we're seeing states roll these out. They're already a GMP requirement or regulation. And so in time, more and more states are starting to adopt these principles. And I think we will see in our lifetime, I would imagine, rather sooner than later, federal legalization that will actually bring that to the forefront very quickly. And so I think it's an opportunity for operators as well as regulators to say, look, this makes sense. They're here for a reason. This obviously contributes to quality, consistency, safety, and compliance. So let's put these in place and help operators reduce the risk that they have in managing their operations. We're also seeing some updates in terms of additives and restrictions on the use of synthetic cannabinoids. I'm sure many of you have seen or read something in the news lately around Delta 8 and Delta 10. Many states taking the initiative and banning those substances from being sold or manufactured in their states. It's an interesting dialogue that's happening in the space, but those are additional regulations that we're seeing hit the market. And so, finally wrapping up the trends that we're seeing, standards and certifications. And this is one that I'm particularly interested in, and I think there's a lot of benefits for the industry. There are several entities that are working on leading the way, organizations leading the way here. ASTM International, International Cannabis and Hemp Standards, the Underwriters Laboratory, the National Institute of Standards and Technology, Association of Analytical Chemists International, and American National Standards Institute. By no means is this an exhaustive list, but they are some of the early adopters have come in and said, this industry is obviously, there's some life here and we should support the industry and let's create some standards. ASTM has created a D737 committee on cannabis. There's 8 subcommittees within that organization focusing on everything from indoor and outdoor horticulture and agricultural practices, quality management systems, laboratory practices, processing and handling, security and transportation, personnel training, assessment, credentialing, industrial hemp, and rounding that out is cannabis devices and appliances, appliances, sorry. So standards are beneficial for many reasons. They're laying the framework for which operators should be adhering to safety, quality, and consistency measures, and ultimately it will deliver on performance, which is great, and the industry, I think, needs that. I think there is an opportunity here to help the industry understand that it's not necessarily saying you have to standardize and duplicate what everybody else is doing. I think there's still a lot of flexibility within the space to have unique processes and unique products, but the underlying principles of how to do that and effectively manage the elements of quality and safety are at the basis of standards and certification process. And so we're starting to see also an increase in certification boards, accredited boards, nonprofits coming to the table and saying, let's help the industry establish, a qualification metric so that companies can go out and demonstrate their ability to meet these standards to the greater public, as well as to potential business partners or clients. So that is in conclusion here. Those are some of the trends that we're seeing. Now, there's I think a lot of benefits to these trends, and what we're seeing is a movement towards addressing quality management and quality assurance. So these trends are helping establish benchmarking for the industry, and so another big buzzword that we hear within this space is best practices. Everybody's got best practices, but when you look at it, much like quality management, there's a lot that goes into that. And how are you really stepping up and establishing that this is truly a best practice? And this is where benchmarking comes in and the quality management principles come in to actually lay the framework, which is laid out in standards and help people understand this is how you track, you measure, and you gauge whether or not you have a best practice, and when in this process or the process design stage you need to make improvements or adjustments to the processes. And so it's really, I think it's going to be a big improvement opportunity for the industry with these trends to address quality management on a larger scale. It's helping to address safety concerns. I touched on corrective action, preventive action plans, and so safety is top of mind, and I think that should be top of mind for any operator in this space, is making sure that the products have been tested so they are safe for consumers and public health safety. Then there's the research side that's contributing to proving out the efficacy of products. There are many touted health benefits of the plant, and rightfully so, but the clinical research that's being done is helping to validate those claims, which I think is very important for the long-term success of the industry, is to have information and data to back up those claims. Productivity and performance, again, touching on best practices, and also seeing an improvement and shift towards more automation. Even with smaller footprints, that shift is increasing the performance levels and the efficiency, reducing downtimes, and reducing defects within the manufacturing process. So establishing the standards, having your protocols, having your documentation, and being able to track that and respond to it is definitely contributing to an improvement in productivity and efficiency. And a subject that most of you listening today are probably well familiar with, risk management. Risk management, I think, touches every aspect of the industry, and these standards are helping companies identify and address exposure within their operations and manage risk, or at least get a better understanding, transparency into the risks that exist and how to respond and handle that risk to the best of their ability. So these are all the benefits that I see in terms of the standards and trends that we discussed earlier. And as we look forward as to what's coming down the pipe, I think, federal legalization, banking reform, a lot of discussion around that. I think banking reform is absolutely critical. And I do anticipate us seeing federal legalization happen at some point over the next decade. We are seeing a shift as well for social equity programs. Recently, I've seen Colorado and Washington come to the plate, establish their own social equity programs, which were missing originally. A lot of the new emerging states definitely baking those into the programs. I think they're extremely valuable and important for our community at large, but also just a long-term success and access to the industry. And we're also going to see a lot more research and development from the health and wellness aspects of minor cannabinoids and terpene ratios and concentrations and mixtures therein. Sustainable initiatives are another hot topic. The cannabis industry is extremely intensive in terms of the carbon footprint it takes to cultivate the products, and so starting to see more and more attention, research and development, processes, equipment that are addressing those concerns. We're starting to see more renewable packaging, even hemp sourced sustainable packaging, and so I think that's another area we'll see a lot of opportunities start to emerge, and with the younger generation really putting an emphasis on company ethos, I think companies that are taking sustainable initiatives and really owning those, they're going to see a return, and obviously it is a hot topic in general today. Artificial intelligence and machine learning, it's still a relatively new industry that is emerging. I see a lot of opportunities with that, both from an equipment advancement and refinement of sensors and tracking environmental conditions within grows, to tracking plant health, disease, and pest outbreaks. But I also see there being a lot of opportunities on the regulation side of things, where agencies using more software and technology to aid in the enforcement and response to the industry needs and consumer needs for protecting public health and safety, but also giving the opportunity to utilize less human resources to still do the same job. So I see that as a shift coming down the pipe as well. And then, as everybody on this call has probably seen in the last couple of months, cybersecurity is making headlines with some major companies feeling the effects of cyber attacks. And I think the cannabis industry is primed for companies coming in and helping the industry address those exposures before they become a problem. This is something too, I think, we touched on earlier, the illicit market. You've got an illicit market where the players there, the legal industry is impacting their revenue streams, and so they are crafty entities that will do anything to protect their revenue streams. And so I think cybersecurity is one that should not be overlooked. And with that concludes the presentation on cannabis today and where it's going and the opportunities at hand. With that, I'll hand it back over to Andy for questions.
Thank you, Sean. Fantastic topic there, fantastic content. I did want to note to the audience that some have already been doing this, but just to make sure you know, the GoToWebinar platform allows us to ask questions, to pose questions through the chat feature. So please do take an opportunity while we have Sean here to ask any questions you may wish. One question that came in early, I should have predicted this one, is that will we be posting this presentation? The answer to that is yes, we do intend to do so. We will be putting it on the ISO Emerging Issues website, which is found at emergingissues.iso.com. Just to put it out there, you do need an ISOnet login to access that content, but we do intend to put it up there. Another question that came in concerned bioengineering, and asking if perhaps, Sean, if you think that bioengineering in lieu of today's more conventional farming and cultivation might be a viable way to address some of the variability issues that you spoke about earlier in terms of growing. And I can tell you, I know our emerging issues team has been tracking and looking at even things like bioengineered brewer's yeast, which apparently can be used to create CBD and THC according to those that are advertising, and say they can do it in a week. So I don't know if that was on your radar, but maybe you could just speak to in general, at least about how bioengineering can maybe help us tackle some of these quality challenges.
Definitely, it is on my radar. I think it is a channel that's going to get greater attention as we look at the carbon footprint that the industry has. But more importantly, as the question touches on, the variability issues, not only within growing but manufacturing. And if we can find the means to creating a very consistent, for the most part, pure raw materials to help develop these products, there's definitely a lot of viability in that. I touched on terpenes, and terpenes, you can source isolated terpenes. And so, there's the ability to take these components and kind of reconstruct the, I guess, the DNA of the plant to a certain extent in products, and that's the attempt. But I definitely see bioengineering playing a role in this industry. To what extent, still kind of unsure about it, but have seen the articles and read about the yeast opportunity. I think that was developed by a university or a group of researchers in California, and that definitely caught my attention because of the opportunity there. And we have been seeing some initiatives in bioengineering come to light with how they're manipulating some of the genetics to address bioavailability and some of the other physical traits of the plant to make it more workable from a manufacturing standpoint, or make it more resistant to certain issues that are common in horticulture.
Thanks, Sean. Yeah, it seems like it's really gone from the basement to the laboratory and to the college campus, in terms of the study and the possibilities. There was something you had mentioned earlier too that I wanted to just reflect on and maybe expand on a bit. You talk about the banking reform, and I think at least in federal terms, that's referred to as the SAFE Act. I did want to also mention, just because we have a lot of insurance professionals on the phone, that there's also a claim act, I believe, that was reintroduced back in March of this year. If it goes before the Senate floor, it's reported to create a safe harbor for insurers that are engaging in the business of, cannabis-related legitimate businesses. So that might be very much of interest to those on the phone. The ISO Emerging Issues team is going to continue to track those legislative efforts and report on that. But I did want to note that Claim Act, if you don't know about it, Google it, take a look. That could definitely change the landscape quite a bit.
Yeah, I'll expand on that just a little bit, Andy. The experience that we've had from a banking perspective is unique. There have been some banks that have come to the table and said, "We'll bank you, and we'll charge you 3% of all your deposits, and a $5,000 monthly fee." It's quite expensive. We found a bank in Colorado that was willing to bank us without those fees, but the due diligence that they took and the processes that we were required to adhere to bank, it caught my attention, because they recognized the concerns around banking the industry, and so they set out to address those concerns. And what happened is we would have to give a full, we would have to basically send in our entire books every month, so they could review every transaction, make sure everything was accounted for with our receipts for any transactions. We had quarterly site visits, and then on an annual basis, we had a third-party independent inspection for compliance purposes to make sure everything was on the up and up. And at first you think, okay, that's just a lot to be asking of operators, but in time you become very conditioned to that, and that's expected. And so once you get past that initial shock of how much is required, you're able to build those systems into to your normal operations. And I see a lot of the topics that we talked about today being something that it wouldn't surprise me if insurance companies say, hey, if we want to write policies for the industry, we should probably put some requirements in here that they have some of these quality management systems or components therein, so we know they've at least addressed that and are managing to the best of their ability some of these elements that would increase risk for operators and stakeholders.
Thanks, Sean. We've got another one coming in. If we can just continue to throw it
Sure.
at you while we have time here. Any improvements in the consistency of labeling requirements? And maybe I'll just add on to that and note that we've seen, this might be more asking about the constituents of the product, but we've also seen restrictions in terms of, no imagery that might be attractive to children. I think some states don't even allow you to put color on the labels. So maybe you could just speak in general about if we're seeing some improvements in the consistency in that realm.
Sure. So I guess this is a somewhat dynamic question, is when we look at consistency of labeling requirements, you touch on, I think, the marketing aspect of labels and what a state may or may not allow. The intent there, keeping this package or reducing the attractiveness of these packages and the contents within to children. We want to obviously protect and safeguard children from getting access to these products and protecting that. So In terms of consistency, we do see a wide variety of rules, and some states have stricter rules than others. I think most states out there have limitations on the use of cartoon characters, animals, fruit shapes, anything that would be appealing to a kid and mislead them into thinking it's a product safe for their consumption. We do see each state coming out with their own coined universal identification symbol to notify anybody who is purchasing or comes across that package that there's cannabis within that package. However, kids aren't always savvy to the fact that that's indicating that. So there's the marketing aspect of it. Then there's the consistency in terms of product labeling, ingredients that are going into it, and then the testing requirements. And so most, if not all states, have a requirement that the THC content be listed on the package, and they specify the format. Those are they can be slightly different. Font size slightly different from state to state. Some states require terpene profiles to also be listed on the labeling requirements, and so there is inconsistency from state to state of what's required. There's also I think from a quality perspective, right now, I think the only context that individuals going into purchase from a dispensary have in terms of quality is a THC concentration number on a label, and that can be rather misleading. Just because a product is lower in THC concentration doesn't necessarily mean it won't have a more intense high, and that's where terpenes play into it, and so that can be a little misleading. And there's obviously a lot of education that needs to happen around, what contributes to the overall effects of a product. So we are seeing there's still a lot of variety in terms of labeling requirements. That's something that I think through federal legalization we become streamlined and consistent, so that the language there's for the most part, those warning statements are fairly consistent, but there's small nuances, and sometimes it's just one word. But from a compliance perspective, if you don't change that word, you're out of compliance, and that creates some unnecessary risk. So unfortunately, still a lot of inconsistency in the labeling requirements.
Imagine how it might be confusing to consumers, and particularly that last point that you mentioned, that even seeing, the THC expressed may not be fully indicative of the experience that the user may have. So hopefully that can become more standardized and more understandable. Next question that came in, Sean, I'm going to let you get a sip of water here. Maybe I can jump on this one. We were asked what ISO is doing specifically to address cannabis industry in terms of our forms. We've only got a few minutes left, but at a very high level, I can tell you that we have filed in some lines of business, many of these filings have been approved, a number of exclusionary endorsements in different flavors, from quote unquote a total exclusion to exclusions with lesser risk exemptions and hemp exemptions across a number of our commercial lines. I would encourage anyone, and at the end I'll mention my contact info, reach out to me. I don't want to spend a lot of time on this, but I can tell you more about the solutions we put out there, not only in terms of those exclusions that I mentioned, but also in terms of some coverage options that are going to be coming out later this year, we hope. So there's definitely a lot of activity within Veris, within ISO on cannabis, and more to come. And again, you can reach out to me and I'd be happy to share. I guess that probably, with 5 minutes to the top of the hour, we should probably get to wrapping it up. Sean, if there are any other unanswered questions here, if it's okay, I'll toss them your way.
Sure.
And you can answer, at your leisure. Up on the screen before everyone is Sean's contact info. I encourage you also that you can reach out to him directly. As you've just heard for the last hour, he's clearly an expert He knows all about this topic, and I'm sure he'd be happy to engage. And as mentioned, here's my contact info. So if you had more questions about what ISO is doing in this space, what the emerging issues team is doing, please do reach out. We want to keep the conversation going. I do also want to take just a quick second to pay attention to the man behind the curtain, Vince Conti. Thank him for putting this presentation together, and especially Sean. We really enjoyed having you here today. Great stuff, and what a dynamic issue to track and try to keep it top of, and it's a challenge for all of us. But I think you really helped us educate us. So we do thank you, and we thank everyone on the line for their valuable time. We hope we earned your attention. We hope you'll join us again. Until then, everyone, please stay well and be safe.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Sean.